are all sensory. You all use your sensory system to make yourself feel good and do what you need for it to do for you. However, kids are not little adults. We can, as teachers, pace across the classroom. We can go get a drink. We can close the door. We can turn the lights off and dim them. What about kids? Kids do not have power. Very often, they're square pegs. You've set the environment, they have to deal. However, kids have a wider range of behaviors and sensory responses than we do. They're kids. They have not a social awareness of what they're doing, if it's socially acceptable or not. But they're bound by their own needs, as are we. But if we do it, it's okay. If they do it, maybe not so much. Unless whatever it is, you make socially acceptable. You have that power, okay? So, let me give you an example about sensory needs being so primary that there's nothing you can do sometimes but manage them rather than trying to get rid of them. So let's say it's the spring, we're outdoors, Mosquito Joe has not come yet. So we have bugs, and there's a bug flying around my head. You ever have that happen to you? It's buzzing. And I said, you know what? I'll give you $100 if you don't swat that mosquito. You just stay still. And the fly is going, and it's going. I said, you know, actually, I'll give you $1,000. How about that? I'm going to up the ante. Eventually, you're going to start to twitch. You're going to twitch like every place, and eventually you're going to swat that fly. It doesn't matter what I promise you. But to protect your body must act even if your mind says, I want $1,000. Now what happens if I ask you to count backwards by threes while that bug is buzzing? You think you can do that?
Maybe the first three numbers.
Maybe you go 100 to 97, but after that you can't think because your body and mind are obsessed with that stupid fly, swat. Okay? When kids are really irritated by internal phenomena that are threatening the safety and the integrity of their body, they will act to protect their bodies every time, just like you. Okay? We're more subtle, kids not so much. So, when all systems are go for kids, they can deal with the sensation around them and be alert for learning. But when their systems are not go and they feel too much and too little, that's not going to happen. So there are two major products of sensory processing. We take all of these senses, these disparate senses, how do they come together to be useful for us to know about as teachers and useful for kids? One product of sensory processing is called self-regulation, big buzzword these days, and the other is called motor planning. So, the ability to self-regulate, which is the ability to act the right way, in the right time, at the right place, relies on your ability to filter out what's not important and hone in on what is. So for you to listen to me, you have to ignore the lights, you have to ignore other people, you have to ignore any noise, you have to ignore like there's a hallway there, you have to ignore if there's smells coming from there, you have to ignore all of that. In other words, filter out anything that's not relevant and just focus on me in order to learn. That's what kids need to do too. And that creates a calm, alert state for learning. But there are kids who cannot regulate their emotions and they can't regulate their bodies. So when kids are bombarded by sensation, I mean, think of a preschool classroom and you've got the epitome of sensory bombardment. The first thing I like to do, I just did this last week in the city, when I go into a preschool classroom is I like to sit on the floor like in circle time, like I'll sit there and I look at what's on the walls. And let me tell you, if you haven't tried that in your classroom, give it a try. It's very, very, very overwhelming. So I'm not saying it's not beautiful, but if you want to know what kids who are overwhelmed are coping with, just take a look at that, just for one tiny thing, and see how you feel if you get a little bit anxious when you see all of this on the wall. So when kids who are overwhelmed and anxious, then one of the causes of anxiety, in fact, in children is being very bombarded with sensation. And the problem is they can't get rid of it. There's no safe space for them to get rid of it. And I don't mean safe space like all the teenage versions of safe space, but having a place for your eyes to rest. It's hard to find a place for your eyes to rest. You can't turn off the sound if it's too loud. And I'm not saying your classroom's too loud. Your classroom might be appropriately nuanced in the loudness and the softness, but that kid can't cope with it. So there's not really a safe space. And plus, kids have no sense of time. They don't know when it's going to be over. They can't read or watch. They don't know what's going to happen next. If you have that nice little chart of like what the activities of the day, that's great if you have the headspace to look at that when you're feeling anxious. But a kid who has anxiety will not be doing that. Just to give you one quick tip, I'm going to get this for you. So, here's an example of a visual schedule that I would use for an individual child who is either anxious or sensory overresponsive. The kid has the order of the day. This is their individual thinking. You know, after free play, they're going to physically move this to done. Then they say, oh, the next thing I have is morning meeting. After that is playground play. So I know morning meeting will eventually be over. When it's done, you move it, it's done. And so it goes. And this goes a long way to allaying anxiety for kids who don't want to transition. Because for kids who are overwhelmed by the sights and the sounds, the smells, and the demands on them, they never want to transition. Why? Because whatever they're doing is fine. They've gotten used to it. Whatever's going to happen next, they have no idea how it's going to make them feel. People might be too close. There might be a smell. They might not be able to do that activity. It may be too loud. Anything where there's any unpredictability built in is the worst thing that can happen to kids with sensory processing challenges. The other product of sensory processing, I'm going to give you like an auditory and visual on how this feels. So if you've got sensory processing challenges, it's going to be hard for you. The audio isn't connected. Hold on. It's worth it. It's just worth waiting a second for the beach ball of nastiness. I'm going to have to send this to you. It's really a shame. I'm not going to wait for it. This is like a demonstration of what sensory processing disorder feels like. And now I'll stop. Okay, I'll go on. The second product of sensory processing is called motor planning. Anybody know what that is? Motor planning is the ability to do stuff with your body, very simply. Oh, come on now. Oops, hold on. Okay, we'll get there. Okay. Motor planning is the ability to interact with the physical world. It's not the same as gross motor skills. Remember I just told you about that baby who was cruising and then like stepped over? Her gross motor skills were very delayed. Her motor planning, however, was absolutely superb. They are not the same thing. And even if you're a student in OT in graduate school and you take advanced courses, it's still hard to understand. It's very hard to understand this concept that a kid looks really physically fit and can't follow directions like you tell the class to go this way and they go that way. So motor planning requires the super detector ability to understand where your body is, how it's mapped up in relationship to the other kids and the other gizmos in the classroom. It enables you to do any kind of novel activity. It enables you to imitate, to play follow the leader, learn a sport, follow directions. Kids who have poor motor planning do not follow directions because you say, go to the cubby and get this, you say, do this project and this is how, and they're like, you lost them at the first instruction. They're still trying to process that one. So I'm going to give you an example now. So kids who have poor motor planning have several difficulties. One is they can't figure out how to do anything. Even if they practice it a million times, any slight nuance is going to be hard. So they can go to climb instruction in one playground, you're not going to generalize that to the next one. If you teach them to move on one day, they're not going to generalize it to the next day because they don't have the wherewithal neurologically to do it. Another part of motor playing is pressure modulation. So do you have kids who like squeeze everything too hard or everything too soft? Do you have kids who like run to the playground and say, I love you, and meanwhile they knocked you over? Right? Or kids who are said to be aggressive but he doesn't mean to be. Aggressive but he doesn't mean to be often means they're squeezing and hugging and smushing other kids to pieces and they don't understand their strength, which is they literally don't understand their strength. They're not integrated feeling it here. That's an underactive system. Their proprioceptive system is underactive. That's another issue with motor planning kids, and that's part of why they're like super clumsy. Like they try to do something, they're applying too much or too little muscle force. So they look clumsy and awkward when they try to do motor activities. So when kids use all of these sensations of touch, proprioception, and vestibular correctly, then they understand when they're in space. They orbit in their own orbit. They're not crashing into somebody else's orbit. But a lot of little kids have either not yet integrated that information or it's a weakness for them. So in order to figure out where they are in space, what do they have to do? They don't feel stuff. What do you think they're going to do? Getting hurt is a negative consequence. What will they do to repair that for themselves? They want to touch. They want to smash. They want to balance on the edge of a sofa in the living room when you're sure they're going to kill themselves, but they never do. They really never do. They're going to tip their chair back. Sometimes they will fall over. Right? They're going to smash. They're going to crash. They're going to love you. They're going to grab things. There'll be nothing on the table that's left idle because they need to feel so that they can feel the ends of their body. They have no end. They melt into everything else that's around them. They want a limit in their body. And if you think of it like learning to drive, when you first learn to drive, and I learned in the city, so that was really difficult. What's your biggest fear when you first learn to drive? Yeah. Before parallel with it, driving, not parking. I'm from the city. I'm the queen of parallel parking. What's the hardest thing to do?
To press the gas.
Stay in your lane. How about merging onto a highway? Let's say onto Route 4, 4 to 17. Right? That's really, really hard because you have to judge how fast you're going, how fast the car ahead is going, how fast the car behind is going, how to time your movements perfectly to land in between them without killing anybody, right? And then when you change lanes, it happens all over again. Oh my God, what do you mean it's the fast lane? How can I ever go in the left lane? Everybody's moving too fast, right? It's really hard to navigate space. You don't understand the limits of your car. You don't know how wide it is, you don't know how long it is, you don't know the timing, and you don't know the speed. You don't know how much force to put on that accelerator to make it go just the right amount. A lot of our kids are not ready for driving. They have yet to be able to drive their bodies. But it's a good analogy for you to think about it when you see kids struggling with that or annoying you because they're not able to do it. So, I'd like to give you a little bit of an example of how intensely we need sensory processing during the day at school. So we're going to take one activity that Nebuch, it's the fall, and we have to do coats. Did that bump it up a notch? It bumped it up a notch for me. Okay, so I'm the teacher, okay, and I'm going to say everybody whose name begins with the letter A, get your coats from the cubbies back there. What's the first sensory system you need to use? Right, no tricks here. Hearing, very good. How about if all the kids are like chit-chatting? You know how that happens? They're chit-chatting. Doesn't that make it easier or harder? Harder, because you need something called auditory figure ground discrimination. Forget the term, but it means that you have to hear that the teacher's voice is more important and noteworthy than all the other chatter. That's an auditory processing skill. And the kid who doesn't hear is not being obnoxious necessarily. They sometimes literally don't hear because they can't separate the most prominent noise from all the background noise. Kind of like if you're the person who, when you're at a wedding or a cocktail party, you know how there's always the people who are outdoors? There's always the same people whenever you go to a wedding with the same crowd. Those people cannot hear when there's other chatter going on, right? What do we do about it socially? Do we adapt? Completely organically. Do kids have the option to adapt? No. Why aren't you listening to me? No one says that to you at a wedding when you're going out, right? No one says that. Okay. Point taken. Now, well, the next thing, so all the kids with the letter A are gonna go get their cubbies. What's the next sensory system they need to use to go to the cubbies? Huh? They need a visual system. They have to see all those little legs to walk over. What else?
They have to know their name starts with an A.
They have to know their name starts with an A. That's another part of auditory discrimination. They have to be able to feel, like our kids walking like this. No, they're walking like this and they're kind of scanning, just like you do. And they have to feel how close they are to other people's little legs, and then they use their motor planning system to adapt to it, so that they're walking and they're not tripping and falling over everybody there. And most kids can do this pretty organically, right? It's a different constellation of little leggies on the floor and hands and books all the time, right? It's never the same 2 days in a row. Practice won't help you do that, like repeating going to the cubbies. Practicing with your body, doing lots of things, give you a sense of body and space, will help you be able to do that. Okay, so now we're to the cubbies, and there's all of these cubbies. What's the next system I need to use? Sight. You need to see which is my cubby. But let's say everybody's got like black Land's End coats. Or red Land's End coats. What's the upgrade of that skill that I need? It's called visual figure ground. The most important visual stimulus has to rise to the surface, and I have to take a note, okay? So I find my coat, and if you're very nice, and you have a kid with this problem, you put their cubby at the end, so they have a clue. So it's not a big deal every time they need to get a coat. So then, right, it's not gonna be a pretty sight. They get to the cubby, and they have to take their coat, and then because you taught them really, really well this great trick, they're gonna put their coat on the ground, right? And look at all this maneuvering that I have to go through here. And I didn't even talk about that part. Here, I put my coat on the floor. Now, what do I do? What's the next sensory system that I need to use? Gotta find the holes. I have to know where to stand. So I have to have a sense of my body in space relative to that coat. I do. Otherwise, you're gonna have to like put me there, right? Then I want to put my hands in the holes. And if you look at this jacket, it all looks the same, right? You would have to be able to really discriminate that those seams are where my hands go. Otherwise, it basically all looks the same. So I'm going to put my hands in. I'm going to flip it over. And what's the next problem? This could happen, could it not? What system do I need to know that you're uncomfortable looking at me? What do I need? What do I need? I need touch. I need to feel that it's here. I mean, this is frankly very uncomfortable. Yesterday I did it, I got my ponytail pointed. Okay, so in order to fix it though, I have to understand the relationship of this jacket to my body. So I'll pull it down, and then how's this? Does this look pretty cool? You think it would be comfortable? You try it later. It's not comfortable, I'm telling you. But for me to know to straighten it out, I would actually have to feel that it's really askew here. So I feel it, and I'm gonna move it. So let's say I have snaps. So if I'm gonna snap, the next challenge is, I can look at these snaps, like when you engage a zip in a zipper, those kids really wanna look because they can't feel how to make those two hands move together, right? So I'll make it easier. I'll do snap, and then I'll do the next snap, using two of my hands together. That's a vestibular function, using two sides of the body together. But then I'm gonna get to here. Now the problem is what? I can't see a darn tooth thing. So what do I have to be able to use? You need to use your sense of touch. I have to touch well. I have to use the right amount of pressure here, the right amount of pressure here in order to do this. And I have to use two sides of my body together. That's a real challenge for a lot of our kids. So in this teeny weeny little activity, you can see that for a kid who's got sensory integration and motor planning problems, the day can be a real challenge. Because this is not even an activity putting on a coat, it's what you do on the way to doing something else. Yeah. So that is really, I hope you felt it, because it's important for you to understand the way it feels to be that kid, so that you can have enough empathy with that kid to think of how you can help them, rather than think, oh, he's doing it again. And of course you're gonna feel that way, but now maybe you'll be able to look at it through a different lens, so you can maybe figure out a little bit how to help him. So what can go wrong? Kids can feel too much in every sensory system. They can feel too much touch, not enough touch, right? So both.